What's up everyone, it's DG Vanguard here, and we are back again with a Narukami deck list. Now this is actually the list that I took to Springfest Cardiff. I was player A in the slot with my brother, who was in B slot with Kagero, and my good friend Keiryn, who was playing Bermuda Triangle in C slot. So, big shout outs to them. They were great teammates and they did very well throughout the day. Our team finished up X2 after 8 rounds of Swiss, overall placing 10th. We were very close to making it actually. Our tiebreakers were really good. We only lost to the eventual 9th place in Swiss, right on the bubble, and the 2nd place of Swiss. So I don't know how 2nd place did after the fact, but they did very well throughout the day, and they were everyone that we faced was very nice. We had a lot of fun, and yeah, I want to go through with you the list in particular because it is a little different than what you might be seeing standardly Narukami players run, and there's a few interesting deck choices that I'd like to explain and why I felt they work and why they did work. I felt they worked on the day. So yeah, let's just get right into it. So for starters, we have Spark Kid Dragoon. Obviously, nothing else to say about that really. And then for the grade 3s, we have Detonix Drill Dragon. 4 of those, the main finisher of the deck. If you're going first, you want to ride this card just so you can immediately start pressuring the opponent with it. Going second, it's actually, I've found, especially in the force heavy meta that we're in, riding your Stinger Dragon first and then following up with the Break Ride usually results in a better win percentage for the deck overall. And just because you are pressuring with those higher numbers, you're able to generate 2 Axel circles, which already is a very good pressuring mechanic for you, especially against force decks which can be quite tanky. And on top of that, he is just a fantastic rear guard even if he's not on an Axel circle, because his ability does gel quite well with other rear guards in the deck. And then lastly, to round out the grade 3s, we do have one Dragonic Kaiser Vermilion. Most of the time, if I had it in hand, he would just be a rear guard. I only rode him once throughout the weekend because I was forced to, out of a bit of a poor ride situation. I'd rode the Stinger, but then I had to follow up into the Vermilion instead of the Detonix Drill. And but it did come in handy. It did enable me to wipe a front row off of Shadow Paladins, which did end up mattering. It did end up depleting their resources enough so that they couldn't pressure me enough to win, and I was able to take that game fairly comfortably. But yeah, I only faced one Axel deck the entire weekend. It was Great Nature, and I lost to that anyway. That was one of the only 2 losses I suffered that day out of the 8 rounds, and there wasn't really anything I could do about that. And I don't think the Vermilion would have helped too much in that situation either. It's just variance triggers and stuff, just things. Some games it just doesn't work out. Next on to the grade 2s, and we have perhaps the MVP grade 2, Dragonic Death Scythe. Similar to Detonix Stinger, he enables a lot of your stronger columns to pressure the opponent, and his control ability is necessary. What you'll find a lot of the time is that you'll only have enough resources most games to use him once. But regardless of that, he is still a very solid swinger at a 24,000 power on an Axel circle, 14,000 unboosted, and then with its ability and other cards in the deck, it can reach even higher numbers, which is really good at pressuring the opponent. Now, onto the controversial choice for the grade 2s. We play 4 copies of the Full Great Foil Dragon, the 12k vanilla for Narukami. Now the reason I played this card was to maximize offense and defense on turn 2. Going first, riding this against most decks is the best way to make sure you are able to control your damage a lot better, as a lot of decks will ride their 10k or 9k Vanguard and they'll be unable to push back at this, or it'll be a lot easier for me to make a no pass against certain rear guards and columns and stuff. The theory behind it is I saw what I was looking at what Japanese players have been using, particularly in the premium meta. The idea struck me when I saw the Akiba GP Ichi-Tom list. Now obviously all of the ideas from that doesn't translate to standard. The ideas from there was some more for the 12Ks to help win the grade 2 game, which obviously is a very big factor in premium. But I thought it's also very relevant in the fact that you are a Axel deck that can't generate any additional power on the Vanguard circle, which means if you're going second against a Force clan, you are most of the time stuck on a 9k Vanguard that, unless you hit a trigger, will not be able to hit the Vanguard. By playing the 12k, your opponent either has to take that damage, which does end up mattering in the long run when you're pressuring with like between 5 and 7 attacks a turn with your Detonix drill, and all of those are hitting at way bigger numbers, or they have to use a card from their hand to no pass it or want to pass it, which again, it does make that difference later on when you are pressing for higher numbers and more attack points. And the 12k body is just it's just relevant. It's just relevant on so many fronts. I actually play this over Recklessness. I don't play Recklessness at all. I haven't, out of all the games, there was like one situation where Recklessness could have come in handy, but I was winning that game already, and the loss of it was not too harshly felt. I feel with Dragonic Death Scythe and Stinger and the bind that you get off of the drill every turn when you use its ability to restand is more than enough to deal with the opponent. You are meant to be playing this. I feel like you're meant to be playing this fast and aggressively. So trying to play a longer game and conserve resources doesn't really add up. And I don't agree with Narukami players who adopt that sort of playstyle. You are still an Axel deck at the end of the day, and the meta is very aggressive. And sort of like to round out that idea of maximising offense in a Force meta, we do play 4 Thunderstorm Dragoon. Again, a very important number, being able to make a 14 or a 24. It's asking Force decks in particular to put more guard onto the field if they want to be able to survive the Axel onslaught, really. And it's a shame that this card isn't Vanguard as well, because I think if it was on Vanguard, I might not have needed to play full great, but I might still have needed to. But even still, like, just having this guy on rearguard, being just a disposable body sometimes is just enough to pressure that extra attack, pressure those extra numbers off the opponent, and it does. The numbers do add up, and it does win you games. So next on to grade 1s, we have our primary ride target going first or second. I feel Demolition's Dragon. Obviously, going second, you have that on-hit draw pressure, which is very great, but a common theme you'll find throughout all of the grade 1s is that they can reach a very magic number for an Axel deck, and that is 11,000 power. The condition for this is obviously your opponent not having any front or rear guards. Now, why is 11,000 important is because a few reasons, actually. Say you have a board of 11k boosters, and you have a full great, that's 23. Immediately, that's pressuring against Force. Or, alternatively, you have a Death Scythe that's just used its ability. That's a 17 on a normal rearguard, Now with an 11k boost, that's 28. Now your opponent has to guard with an additional 5,000 shield, as opposed to an additional 10,000 shield. Actually, no, 15,000 shield overall. This will add up if, say, this wasn't, if the 11k booster wasn't there. And obviously on Vanguard Circle, having a 12k being boosted by an 11k, especially one that stands with an additional power, is really good. So your first swing would be usually 23, and it would restand for 17 if you've not checked a trigger or anything. And again, the concept of this column also applies to, say, if you had Detonix Stinger there, and that's used its ability, because again, 17, 11, 28, that's more guard that your opponent has to force out to be able to protect itself, to protect themselves against it. And these little increments of just asking the opponent for extra 5k guards every turn is why I felt this deck was actually like extremely effective at dealing with a lot of the meta threats that it came up against. I only faced Bermuda once, however I won that match actually fairly comfortably, surprisingly enough, and that was because you were able to aggress and pressure them with the necessary numbers every turn. This concept also does apply to Kagero. I was 1-1 against Kagero. I faced them twice, and the first game I did win. It was very close, but I did pull through because of those reasons. And the second game that I lost was more due to more exterior factors like trigger luck. My opponent was getting defensive triggers, like defensive crits, heals, draws, and I just wasn't seeing any of my drive checks. And it does matter when you check triggers in this deck. A lot of the time, if you're unable to check triggers, you're in a much more difficult position than you would be if you were. And next grade one, the best one of the deck, it's definitely Rising Phoenix. Its revival is just insane. I wish that more Axel clans had a card like this actually, and I do hope that Bushiroad applies this sort of design logic to things going forward, because its versatility and how you can use it really does make the difference. And the main way that I used it though was less for a multi-attack purpose and more to just help fill out the ranks with, again, those very important 11k boosters. And a lot of the times you're only really going to be seeing 2 of this anyway, so being able to bring those back behind your main rear guards is probably the best value to it. I was testing Brant the night before the tournament as well, and my friend Keiryn, who was a very good Link Joker player, he was using Brant Ringer, and that effect had obviously been active, but with these in the back row, the front triggers I was checking were powering them up, and that basically turned my non-Axel columns into Axel columns in a way, with these boosting up. They're actually higher numbers than anything my Axels were pumping out at the moment, which was actually was crucial in deciding those games. And then lastly, for grade 1s, we have the Lizard Soldier Ricky. Again, very important combo piece. Well, not just combo piece, just a very important unit for the deck in general. I don't know why some people don't run 4 of this. I feel it's so important to be able to get priority targets where you want them, to bind them, and to move back row units to the front so that you can bind them as well. Say if you've already wiped out your opponent's front row, but they still have a unit or 2 in the back row that can move up with Ricky, you can call them down and get them moved so you can bind them. There was only one situation where where he wasn't there when I needed him, and that was against the Kagero game I lost, where my opponent's grade 2 ride, he rode and he called down 2 airmos, one behind his Vanguard, one just in a rear guard column. He didn't bother calling anything to boost with it. But I so wish I had him in my hand for that situation, because then the 2 cards I had to discard for the Detonix restand would have only been 1, and this could have potentially been an extra attack had I had it as well, which could have been very very important for that situation. However, I didn't have him. I wish I had him, but you know, you still have to play 4 of it, and you know, I'm glad I did play 4 of it. When you see it, it's a very important card, and even if you don't swap rear guards around, the majority of the time I actually use this guy's Soul Blast was to just to get an 11k booster, because I will say it again, those numbers that you're pushing every turn, they do matter in a force heavy meta, and you already have the advantage in an Axel clan against Protect, so you have to be maximizing your potential against force, especially with it being so prominent. So that's my reasoning really behind the grade 1s justify the grade 2s, I feel, and you know, some plays in the grade 3s. Particularly how you use Stinger is directly informed by how you use your grade 1s. If you use the grade 1s for the utility of just being 11k boosters, I feel you'll find a lot more success against force decks with this one, especially if you're going second. It's not the be all end all going second with this deck, especially with a 12k Vanguard on grade 2 that can actually hit back and defend itself a bit more efficiently, and then back row rear guards that can push those numbers back at force clans. Lastly, onto the triggers. We'll start off with the draw triggers because I play 5, 4 of them being the Sentinels. Now, why play the additional one? The important thing is sometimes that you will start running short on hand, and sometimes you won't have the means to get rid of every single one of your opponent's rear guards to get the sort of like the most efficient stand with your Detonix drill. The additional draw trigger is there to make sure that, say if you damage check it or just drive check it, you're able to, during your turn, still commit to board pieces that could swing for lethal, or just swing at your opponent to pressure them in general, while still being able to discard the necessary number of cards to get the restand off your Detonix. Now, this actually came up about a fair few times during the day, and you know, it was the reason why I was able to win a couple games, because I had that extra card to discard. And next after that we just have the 4 heals obviously, and then it is 7 front triggers. The front triggers are probably the most important aspect of this deck. Say if you're able to generate 2 Axel circles, these are at their most threatening. Well, 2 Axels and above, the front triggers are at the most threatening. Even if you only have 1 Axel circle, a front trigger play can win games a lot of the time. There's very rare occasions that I check double front triggers in this deck. I don't think I checked them once throughout the whole. I don't think I checked double front triggers once throughout the whole day. But in a situation where you have 5 front row circles, and you check even just 1 front trigger, the ability to turn units that are at usually about 23 to 20 to sometimes 28 to 33 and 38, those are the games that are actually you just win outright there, because your opponent, even if they check like 1 defensive trigger, they still have to guard all of those attacks for the same value that they had to before, and that's big really. I had tested the deck with crits and tried to maximize on the amount of crits for the, you know, obviously like with a restanding deck, you know, I think, oh, my Vanguard can get a crit, oh, that's really good if it hits, but at the same time then you're like missing out on the value on the rest of your field, and I feel for an Axel deck that's the point really. So the crits, even if I was testing like 5 and then 2 crits, the fronts became far less consistent, and the crits, I never saw them offensively, so I just cut them entirely and just maximize on front triggers, and I felt like it worked. The understatement, yeah, it's understated as hell just how much value you can get and how easy your wins become once you just check one front trigger with a full setup board. It's almost unbreakable. So that is the profile. I do hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've gained a lot of... I hope I've been able to provide insight and good explanation as to why these cards have worked the way they have, and why I basically min-max the hell out of this deck to maximize the force matchup, which I feel is probably the biggest, what you need to do with Axel in this current metagame. And because of that, there is also that element of surprise in there. Where, not many people expect to face Axel, or well, they expect to face like Great Nature or Murakumo, but they don't expect to face Detonix, and you can snap a lot of people off guard by doing that. They don't expect a second Overlord, basically. And that's what Detonix ultimately is in this meta. It's Overlord light, but you can still do things that Overlord can't, and I feel that is something to appreciate on its own. But yeah, if you are interested in using this list, or making any changes to it yourself, adapting it to your own sorts of playstyles, and then go for it. And I hope you got, I do hope you've got something useful out of this. And that's the main thing why I wanted to post this, because I got something very useful out of building Narukami this way. Hopefully that'll help some of you going forward. So yeah, hopefully I'll talk to you again soon.